Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us. This is the second of Sunwest Communications webinar series on looking ahead past the COVID-19 crisis. As was mentioned, my name is Creighton Webb. I'm CEO of Sunwest Communications. We're a 35-year-old public relations, public affairs firm that focuses on media relations, public relations, social media, and a lot of crisis communications, which is what we're going to be talking about today. As was mentioned earlier, we're very interested to know who all is joining us. So if you would, in the chat function, if you haven't already, be sure to enter your city and state where you're joining us from. And about half past the hour, we will invite you to, through the chat function, share your questions, and we'll make sure that we get all of those to our panelists. As I mentioned, today we're talking about crisis communications, and in particular, beyond the crisis, looking ahead. We have a panel of 4 distinguished expert communicators who are going to join us here in just a minute. Of course, there have been so many challenges that COVID-19 has created for our country, for our communities, not only from a healthcare perspective, clearly and obviously, but also from a financial perspective. For communicators who have been at the center of this, communicating to audiences for all kinds of brands, internally and externally, to employees and stakeholders and stockholders, and externally to the media, or perhaps to customers and consumers in general, there have been a fair number of challenges created by COVID-19 in communicating as well. What do we communicate, and when, and how often, and on what platform? At Sunwest, we've had a fair number of clients who have come to us and very earnestly and honestly, communications experts who've done this for a long time and who have said, our plans aren't set yet for, say, for example, reopening. So we're not going to say anything. And our number one piece of advice has been to communicate early and to communicate often, even if you don't know the details, so you don't leave your most important audiences and stakeholders wondering what is coming next. And adding, of course, to the uncertainty if you don't say anything. So as I said, we've got 4 very distinguished panelists today who are experts. Their organizations have done it right, did it right in March and throughout, and are again making those same efforts here as we discuss as a nation, as individual states and communities returning to work and reopening. We've got Todd Anderton from Trademark Property Company, Christina Helwig from AdvoCare International, Micaela Rosinski from Andrews Distributing Company, and Doug Ward from GeoGlobal Partners of the OASE Group. We'll go to each of them individually. I'm going to start just alphabetically. So Todd, we're going to start with you. As I mentioned, Todd is Vice President of Marketing with Trademark Property based in North Texas. They're a full service real estate firm with a focus on retail and mixed use spaces. So Todd, tell us a little bit about your company's situation as the outbreak took place back in March. Who did you have to communicate to? What did that look like? And how did it go?
Great questions, and thanks for having us. So I would say this, our challenge was pretty interesting in that we had markets across the United States. We have a portfolio of 19 properties from coast to coast. So the big challenge for us going into it was trying to figure out how we were going to convey messages, not only across various markets, but also across various groups. So in a particular example, we had a shopping center, say in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We had to communicate to, number one, our stakeholders who own that property, who we work on their behalf. We had to communicate with our tenants, letting them know the process for how that center was going to close and then hopefully safely reopen. We also had to communicate with our own staff, our own personnel. What does your employment situation look like? How will we operate on a bare bones and working away from the center? So it was a pretty complicated series of equations, and each equation was different depending on the market you were in.
So Todd, just so you know, we're getting a little bit of feedback in your audio. So just for next round, it could be on our end as well, but I just thought I'd mention that. Christina Helwig, let me go to you. AdvoCare International, based in North Texas, but a global company. Of course, it's a 27-year-old company focused on health and wellness. How did the outbreak impact you all? And from a crisis communications perspective, how did you respond?
Absolutely. Thanks, Creighton, for having me on today. You know, we've been through crisis before, and I think that through that, it allowed us to be more prepared for this type of a situation. So we already knew kind of internal and external who the specific audiences are within each of those groups. what type of message might be portrayed to each of them, who owns them, because essentially some groups are better to be reached out to by phone versus social media and email. So we really felt like the crisis in the past certainly prepared us for this today. We came out of the bat just with a test work from home internally. It turned into a very long-term situation as we're still at home. But we really went forward with honest, transparent communication to our customers and internal. And we haven't skipped a beat in the sense that we've still continued with our marketing and sales efforts still to this day, and just trying to keep moving forward in a positive light despite the things that are going on around us.
Okay, good overview. Thank you very much. Next, we've got Micaela Rosinski, who's the communications manager for Andrews Distributing Company. Andrews is one of the nation's largest beer distributors. So you, Micaela, may be one of our most popular panelists. We know that you all deliver over 700 beer brands to 26 North and South Texas counties. What was it like for Andrews when this all hit in early March? And how did you respond?
Yeah, it was really, really interesting. I think for us, the fortunate thing that we kind of had in our back pocket was no matter what we were touching, what we were working on, the history of this company has been focused on our team members first and foremost. So when we transitioned to this really weird new space of there's a pandemic, oh, and by the way, you're an essential business and you have essential workers, being able to keep that focus on our people and kind of already having that foundation built, I think was beyond helpful, and then really was allowing there to be space for our leaders to completely halt everything else they were doing and really shift into this risk and response mode. And part of that was bringing communications in immediately and making sure that we were at the table and that our people were getting everything they needed, because part of it too was, I mean, you have to create as you go. There's all these new safety protocol and wanting to protect our people, but also wanting to protect our retail customers and making sure brewing partners are aware what's going on within this region. So it was a lot of just hoping we were doing right by our people, but really having the leaders in place who were driving that strategy for us and making sure that we were able to support along the way with the communications.
Very good, thank you. Now we've got joining us from West Palm Beach, Florida, Doug Ward. He's the president of GeoGlobal Partners, which is the North American subsidiary of the OASE group based in Germany. And of course, they have water gardening and garden decor and lake management products that you might have seen at Home Depot and at Lowe's. So Doug, also, by the way, Doug and I found out here before we started the webinar that both of us lived in Bend, Oregon, in Central Oregon in the mid-90s. So tell us, Doug, a little bit about your situation as the outbreak occurred in mid-March.
Sure. So for us, this all started back, our preparation started in 2017 because we are in South Florida. We came up against Hurricane Irma. And Hurricane Irma taught us that preparation for disasters, flexibility, mobility for our employees was very important. So move ahead to 2020, because we're a global company, we have an office in China. So in January, we became very aware of what was happening because there were affected. So we had maybe a little bit of a head start on understanding what might be happening here in the US. So in February, we turned back on our disaster response team to come up with what we thought was the right playbook for this disaster, a pandemic, which was not in our playbook, by the way. And on March 13th, we put it in practice. So on March 13th, that was the last day that our employees were in the office. So since that point, we have been working completely remotely and have had no real interruptions with any of our business. And we expect to be just fine coming out of this, and we can talk more about that later. But again, having a plan was the most important thing, and then enacting it and making sure that you adapted it based on things you were seeing in real time made a big difference for us.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point. We hear that all the time. We often say at Sunwest, if you're in the middle of a crisis and developing your crisis communications plan, in other words, if you're building the plane while you're flying it, it's too late. And of course, you don't have a choice at that point, but really important to have a plan in place ahead of time. If you're just joining us, thanks so much for being here for Sunwest Communications webinar on looking ahead beyond the crisis. Today, we're talking about crisis communications with 4 expert communicators. I'm going to work backwards again, Doug. So let me start with you. And you mentioned the plan, but let's get into some of the tactics. Were there some particular tactics from a communications perspective, internally or externally, that worked especially well? And then by the same token, were there any opportunities, things that perhaps didn't go so well? That, because as you know, everybody who's listening, and by the way, we've got folks from Delaware to Fort Lauderdale to California to DC all joining us here today. I want you to brag, but of course people want to know the warts and all of what worked and what didn't work.
Sure. So the first part was the plan for the employees. Number one was putting safety as our first primary goal. What was best for them? What was best for their families? And again, that meant getting them home as quickly as possible, but giving them the tools to still be productive. And hopefully that productivity was at a high level. And once that was established, it was also then to send a message to our employees what we plan to do, both short and long term, to protect, first of all, the health of the company, the health of the employees, and then subsequently the health of our customers, who we all rely on for cash flow. So the first part was the employees. Once that was established, because we are a global company, we have 20 subsidiaries. I was then part of a global team to share best practices with my colleagues in the other countries. So we have colleagues that were even more affected than we were. Our Italians, the Spanish, much more than we were in South Florida. So we learned a lot from each other, and then put together our plan. And then the third step is how do we reach out to our supplier partners and our customers. So we did a lot of that initially through email to get the word out to them, and then follow that up with conversation on the phone. That was not a one-time event. In many cases, on every Monday morning, we have a template that we share with our suppliers and our top customers to let them know what's going well, almost like a green light, yellow light, red light. So what's going well, what's cautionary, and what is not working. And there are things not working. There are supply chain issues. For example, in early January and February, we had supply chain issues in Asia. Well, those are resolved, but now we have supply chain issues in Mexico because Mexico has stopped most of their manufacturing. So depending on our time, we continue to have disruption that we, again, are sharing with all of our colleagues and our customers.
Micaela, let me go to you with the same question on the tactics. What worked well? What hasn't worked as well as you would have hoped?
Yeah, I mean, I think what worked really well, and I mean, just looking at the team that's kind of been activated to support everything here, was seeing how agile everyone has been able to be and completely stop at an executive leadership level, pivot, I mean, give full focus to this and really give that direction to all of our teams, communication included. I know in our partners at Sunwest have probably seen this. I mean, some of our work at Andrews, we can be a little slower to really get into the weeds of projects and launch and really get everything from start to finish. And it comes from a place of caring and really wanting to take every consideration and step and wanting it to be perfect. And I think this really has pushed us outside of the bounds of, hey, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it can be great and it can be informative and it can be helpful to our people. So really learning how to see that shift, and not just for us, but watch our leaders kind of grow into that too. I know Caitlin, a member of my team who's on, she led a project team and a group to completely scope, vet, and launch an emergency text communication channel in one business week. In a normal world, that probably would have taken us 2 quarters to do and execute, and to see everyone really come together, see an opportunity that we needed to better communicate with people more urgently about these type of topic. Much like was said earlier, pandemics were not part of our crisis communication plan and scope that we were trying to be prepared for. So really just getting to see the team come together and be reactive in a way that was really productive was really great. I would say on the flip side of that, there's still growing pains to be had with that. I mean, we've seen moments where there maybe wasn't total alignment across teams, and you really feel like you don't have time to press the brakes and regroup and recircle, but it is so important to keep those lines of communication open with your leadership and across your teams and really make sure you're staying connected. Our office team members, I mean, we're a pretty traditional company in that we are always physically in the office. We are always together. And this has pushed us to understand what it's like to collaborate and work in a space when we are not in that environment. And it comes with its growth opportunities. So I think we've seen the good and the bad of it, but definitely trying to take those learning moments and really grow from them.
Yeah. You said something that I thought was very interesting at the beginning of your comments, and it's something that we hear ourselves saying a lot, which is don't sacrifice the good for the perfect, right? I mean, it's better to communicate than to not say anything at all and wait for just the perfect message, because in a crisis that doesn't always happen.
Absolutely. And I mean, I've talked to Maggie at Sunwest extensively about this, almost probably as therapy sessions, but really trying to challenge our leaders to see that too. I mean, the really interesting piece about COVID-19 is there is new information every single day and every single week. I mean, you're just talking about, production and businesses in Mexico. That's a supply shock for us and our Mexican import brands. And it's a huge part of our portfolio and what we sell, and understanding what that means for us. And even if we don't have all the answers today, it's still something that we should probably share with our sales team and let them know we are working on it and we are working on finding answers, which is a shift, I think, for some of our leaders, and always wanting to be buttoned up and always wanting to have everything to say. But getting in a space where it's okay to acknowledge that, hey, we know it's a question, but we're working on it and we don't have the perfect answer just yet. So I'm still working on it today. It's still not there totally, but it's going.
Well, and in fact, people often appreciate that authenticity of everything not always being perfect. Christina, Helwig, let's go to you. So 27-year-old legacy company, and of course, everybody knows Spark. But you all have an added layer, because not only do you have employees and not only do you have customers who buy Spark, but you have this independent sales force as well. What worked in communicating with all of your different constituencies, and then perhaps what did not?
Absolutely. So we found, excuse me, first off the bat, definitely getting the message out to those leaders and our independent contractors about what was going on. While it's a small audience, our will call here in North Texas did close, and yet that's still important to those people that have access to it. And just again, with that kind of, it's not perfect. We don't have all the answers today, but we closed it on March 13th and still haven't opened it. Just letting them know along the way, we're still continuing to evaluate, and we can't wait to bring that back at some point. We were doing emails, we were doing the Facebook Lives, trying to find all the different ways to get to people, and yet still kind of miss that community aspect. I think for us, it just was lacking. And so we started doing Zoom Hangouts with our leaders, our independent contractors by the regions, and those have become really successful. We didn't do that until probably week 5 or 6, doing them every few weeks. And sometimes there's, only a very small handful, but sometimes there's 100 people on, and just to realize they're not in it alone either, that they have other people they can connect with to support them. And of course we're here, but just to know as human beings that we're all going through this in some way. I think that really brought everybody together and has been probably the best thing we've done with that group in terms of changing our communication with them through this change.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. So Todd, I think you're back. Your comms are back with us, your audio? Uh-oh, take yourself off mute. Uh-oh. Isn't that the way? I tell you what, so while Todd's unmuting, we have a poll that we want to launch for our all of our participants. So let's put those questions up now. We'd like all of you to participate. this gives us a sense, and all of our panelists, of really where you are. So far, how would you rate your preparedness to communicate and your communications internally and externally about COVID-19? Would you say you were behind, you weren't ready, and your communications were mediocre at best? Would you say you were just okay? We've sent a few emails and haven't gotten much of a response. Would you say you were right on target? You feel good about your message, timeliness, frequency, and overall tone? Or would you say you were ahead of the curve, prepared and followed a strong communications plan? So if all of our participants joining on the call, all of you who've dialed in from all over the country would take our poll quickly. Let's see, it says hosts and panelists cannot vote. So we're panelists, we're out. We don't get to vote. So hopefully we'll have some results here in just a few minutes so we have a better sense of everybody who's joining us. I think we've got about 80 folks who are with us, and there are the results. Okay, so pretty good. So about 56% feel like they were right on target. They feel pretty good about their message, timeliness, frequency, and overall tone. A few who were behind, a few who were ahead of the curve, but most in that middle section. Okay, good. So let's go to our next question. We've got one more. All right, here it is. As you prepare to return to the office, how would you rate your preparedness and communications to your key audiences so far? Are you underprepared? You're scrambling, trying to get everything together. You're right on track. Feel good about your communications plan and your timing, or you're ahead of the curve. You were prepared with a strong communications plan that will serve as a best practice. We'll have you on the next panel. All right. So if all of our participants would go ahead and put in where you think you are as you prepare to return to the office, underprepared, right on track, and ahead of the curve. And we should have some results here real time momentarily. If you're just joining us, again, this is Sunwest Communications webinar on looking ahead past the COVID-19 crisis. And today we're focused on crisis communications. And we have 4 panelists in varying areas, consumer products, as well as real estate, from all over the country, some local brands to North Texas and others that are national. So here we go. So again, 47% feel like they're right on track. About 30% feel underprepared, and about 25% ahead of the curve. So not insignificant, because that's feeling underprepared is never a good place, but good to know that about 70% of the audience joining us today feels like they're ready to go, particularly as we head back to work, or at least states open up. Todd, all right, let me go back to you. Real estate has been on the front line of this. Of course, when you've got retailers and restaurants that were asked to close or were forced to close, these are some of your folks. So from a communications perspective, same question to you. What did y'all do really well? And then what was an aha moment, if you will, throughout the process?
Let me ask, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Hallelujah.
Wonderful. Okay, so we're back. That's a great question. Our portfolio has a lot of food and beverage use, and talk about a category that has really struggled, and suffered during this crisis. The thing that we immediately realized was, if there was a restaurant that was able to do anything constructive or productive, takeout, curbside, to go, whatever, we were making sure that we were communicating that message as much and as often as we could. We wanted to make sure that we were explaining to them, like, it is vital that if you have any kind of presence right now, that we're able to share that with the market. And a great example too is that we had a restaurant partner here in DFW where they were primarily focusing on giving meals away and soliciting donations to give meals. And you know what? We blasted that song from the rooftops. We partnered with them as much as we could. We gave money to them. We were like, listen, at this time of need, anything we can do to promote that you're trying to create a semblance of positivity, of momentum, we were all in for it. So that was big. If a tenant had a story to tell, we did everything we could to make sure we were telling it with them.
So we're actually starting to get questions from our participants, which is fantastic. So this is really a timely one, and really, I think perfect segue. Our attendee says, how do you formulate the message? We don't know what's going to happen, but we'll be ready when it does. Micaela, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, really looking at it with the internal lens, no matter what it is we're communicating at a topic level, our opening has pretty much been that our continued focus will be the safety of our team members and the comfort of the environment that they're in. I mean, when you look at our organization, we have about 1,500 team members, and really only about 150 of those are office-based shared services jobs. So you're really looking at over 1,000 people who are mobile, whether that's in distribution centers or on delivery trucks or in the market with sales and merchandising. So you have people who are already all over. I mean, they're doing hard work. And I mean, when you look at the volatility of the market with on-premise accounts, like Todd was saying, with bars and restaurants closing overnight, having to shift those roles to support other aspects of our business, as we saw grocery and convenience and big box stores experience increased sales with pantry loading in the first couple weeks, and then trying to figure out the ebb and flow of how people are gathering and really what's kind of driving sales in different parts of the state. It involves a lot of movement and a lot of change for people who are already doing a lot of hard work. And then, oh yeah, let's make them wear masks and follow really strict protocol and not ride in trucks together and all these other variables. So wanting to emphasize safety and care has really been the opening. And then I think it's allowed us to be honest, kind of like we were talking about earlier. If we don't have all the answers and don't know the full plan just yet, I think us reminding our people that the roadmap and the guiding light for all of those decisions will continue to be their safety and protection has been really helpful.
Yeah, you really can't go wrong with that message, can you? I mean, it's honest, it's sincere, it's reassuring, it's what people want to hear. Doug Ward,
Yeah.
let's go to you. Same question. How do you formulate the message? We don't know what's going to happen, but we'll be ready when it does, externally or internally.
Sure. So I'll take the approach up front of externally. So as a provider of product that ends up on retail shelves, we are a cog in the wheel of getting consumers to enjoy our products in their backyards, in their houses. So for us, the management of our supply chain is the most precious thing that we have. So our messaging is that we have a plan in place, we have deviations of that plan, we have dual sourcing of key items, we have the ability to expedite, we have the ability to repack. There's a variety of variables that we can implement if we're forced into that situation. We also have the global resources of our parent company in Germany for additional support. So when a US retailer is dealing with us just in the US, they're just seeing a small piece. We're like the piece of the iceberg that you can see. But underneath there's a wide ranging of supply chain that is available to help us be a better supplier to our retailers. On the internal side, trust. Trust has to be the first thing. Please do not trust leadership, then any message you give them is going to be just a lot of words. So they're looking for action. So if you continue to show them that your words are followed up by action, then you are ahead of most companies that deal with disruption.
Yeah. And trust is really a good business case for communications also, as we all deal with HR professionals and legal who have very valid concerns and oftentimes pushback for communicating, particularly too early or before a plan is baked. I think that trust pillar is a really important case to be made. Todd Anderton, how about you is it really that simple? Is it really just about making sure that all of the messages at their heart are about reassurance? Is that what it comes down to?
It certainly seems that way right now.
Yeah.
I know in our standpoint, our first line of defense in terms of a positive message and trying to create some sense of comfort to bring people back to our properties is we are doing as much as we can reasonably go out and find solutions for cleanliness, safety, your protection, and we're going to be ready to talk about that at any level you want to. And for some people, that might be going to our property website, seeing our cleaning plans. Some people, that might be a phone call, right, and talking through it. It might be anything in between. So yeah, the answer is, I think at this particular moment, that reassurance that we are going above and beyond to try to create a safe environment to come and spend time around other people. It is it's the cornerstone of everything we're doing right now. Everything that we're doing is based off that as a baseline.
Christina, a question for you that I think is most appropriate for you that we just received from one of our participants. It says, what do you see for the future of live events, trade shows, conferences, conventions, awards, events? And of course, I think, if I remember correctly, AdvoCare had a major event just before the outbreak. And of course, with an independent distributor network, events are a really important part of what you all do or have been traditionally. How do you see it?
It's different, right? So it has to be different, I think, and I think it will be for quite some time. So from a live event perspective, we are not anticipating doing that for a while. We had a couple, one in the fall that definitely is not happening. We're moving to virtual. And, you know, next year, even early on, we're looking to adapt all of our events that are in the first part of 2021 to be virtual, so that people can stream it, but then also how do they continue to get the content after just that one day, because life looks different. I mean, how often would it be that we're all sitting at home here on a Zoom or webinar? And so with people, you know, not knowing what homeschooling looks like and juggling all of that, the ability to not just get the content once, but to be able to get it afterwards as well, I think is really important. You know, the other part of it that we genuinely didn't think about in the beginning is we do a lot of activations. So we sample a lot of our products, Spark, out there in the market at different events, and even that looks different. So while the organizations who host the activations are certainly changing their models and what that looks like for us, you know, I just say we're not comfortable with the safety, putting our team members on a flight next month at this point. You know, we can't ask them to do that and just feel comfortable. So what does that look like? What does distance look like at activations, at, you know, trade shows? Are there screens, you know, sampling products? Just, it does have a whole different thing. And while we don't have all the answers, we're trying the best we can to put plans in place for that, touchless payment systems and things like that too. And just connecting with people that do this all the time too. So how do we find the experts, partner with them to really learn the best? And just get ready for it, because it is definitely, it's coming faster than we want it to.
Yeah. So this next question is really for all of you. You know, there are a number of pitfalls in communicating early and often, and in following the rules, if you will, of good crisis communications. And, you know, I always say that the tools in the toolbox, there's only so many. They aren't terribly complicated. It's just very difficult to actually get them done and to thread the needle. And therein lies the issue. So, for example, reopening. How many of us have put out communications about reopening and details, and then that just generated additional questions of things that you missed or didn't think about? Which then causes additional consternation. Philanthropic gifts. Maybe your organization is having to make some really difficult financial decisions, but wants to be a good corporate citizen. Pretty hard to say, hey, employees, your life might look different, but hey, we're making a philanthropic donation in the same breath. Or even not appearing self-serving in your marketing messages, trying to get back on track. You've got to open back up, but you don't want to look like you're insensitive. Have you all faced any of those pitfalls, and how did you face them? Raise your hand if you want to go first. Who wants to go first? Nobody wants to go first on that one. Or Micaela, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the philanthropic piece is a really interesting topic, and it was kind of a new space for us to try to figure out, and definitely in collaboration with my counterpart at Sunwest. But we're lucky, again, with the foundation of being a really purpose-driven company and our leadership really wanting to show up as good stewards of the community. And while it was outside of the bounds of our typical giving focuses, once we saw the on-premise shut down, I mean, all of our bars and restaurants, for us, that was our retail partners being hit very hard, and a lot of them furloughed, and a lot of our local bars and restaurants and the people we work directly with every day out of work. So really a great opportunity that the Andrews family stepped up to support was Furlough Kitchen, who provides meals every day to furloughed industry workers, which is just fantastic. Takes a lot of money to make that happen every day, and it's not easy. So Andrews did decide to step up and sponsor it for an entire week. As a communicator, you get really excited and you're like, oh, this is great. Let's share it with everybody. Let's share it with the industry, our team. But there's the watch outs and exactly what you were talking about. We've not had to make any, I would say, super critical, very hard decisions yet, but we need to be conservative in what we are doing. And there are some changes from team members that have happened in the last 2 months, and it's definitely hard and it's definitely different for Andrew. So finding the balance of that messaging of, hey, we still need to show up for people and who we've said are our stakeholders and our partners, and being able to communicate clearly why that's still important and it still is okay that we do need to provide balance to make some just smart decisions internally too. So I think that was a learning experience for us, at least at my time at Andrews. We've not really had watch outs like that with our giving. Usually we can just give and there's an active touch point. And then especially if it's something where our team members are physically involved, it's positive, it's great. So having to navigate that for once was a different experience.
I'll bet. Doug, you had your hand up next. I'll tease you a little bit. We'll go to you next because you said there was a storm going over you there in Florida. So I saw your lights go out a couple times. Hopefully you're not losing power.
So there's a funny story there. We energy saving lighting. So if I don't move, the lights go off. So if you see me dancing,
in your arms,
I'm not doing a TikTok video. I'm trying to keep the lights.
I would admire your multitasking ability if you could do it.
So from our standpoint, the messaging of early and often, we haven't had any negative repercussions to that, but I will give you one thing that we did learn is that with internally with our subsidiaries and our parent company, we were having twice a week. This started right in twice a week, hour-long Teams meetings. We use Teams pretty much for our video conversation, followed up by documentation of what was happening in every subsidiary. It became very tedious because the amount of data that you had to put together was taking up action. So we ended up realizing that we were over communicating internally too much. So we've now stepped it back where you're only updating it if there's something material that has changed that the rest of us need to be aware of. So that was where the beginning, everybody was all hands on deck. We over communicated, which was good, but now we've slowed it down. So our communications now are not as, they're not happening as often, but the discussions are still as valid. The other thing we found out is from our consumers. As we took our salespeople off the road, our business is very seasonal. So spring is our top season for our products. Mm-hmm. Consumers that have either bought our product and have questions, or we have consumers that have questions before they buy. So we had to really double down on our customer service, our customer experience teams to be able to help these folks because we're all at home. And if you have some idle time, you want to do something maybe you had planned to do, but you didn't really get to it. Well, some of our categories fit into that mold. So we were able to, we converted to a cloud-based phone system. So our customer service agents were able to start taking calls from their homes. So all of the numbers now, they come in here and then they route right whatever person is. That was a big plus for us to keep consumers getting the messaging of how to use their products and satisfying them. So a big advantage is having, again, flexibility with your systems to either be cloud-based or have some kind of phone system that really can follow you and not be stuck to a phone sitting on a desk.
Let's go to Christina and then Todd.
Sure. You know, I think for us, it all did happen fast. And so we took we honestly paused probably for that first week while we were proactive with our customers. We did kind of slow down for a week just to make sure we had all of our ducks in a row and really think about how we wanted to move forward. And we took an approach, a proactive approach, and definitely partnered with Ginger at Sunwest. She's kind of my right hand for sure. But, you know, we reached out to a local station here in North Texas with Good Morning Texas. And we actually started doing some media pitches that way and just promoting kind of the non-product, non-salesy things that we can bring to the market. So we have 5 pillars of wellness in this day and age. One of them is stress. One of them is sleep. things, again, that everybody's dealing with right now. And so how could we put out just good messages and education for people? We wrote lots of blog posts, lots of social media interaction. We ran some fun sweepstakes with it. And that really it was just a feel good and something that was an easy pivot for us, but definitely took lots of time and effort, but was just the right message we felt like to be able to bring to the market at this time. And one of the great things that came out of it is we established Workout Wednesdays. So we did this 5-week series, and now we're committing to doing it for who knows how long now, but one workout a week. It definitely, they're good. Sometimes they might really kick you down, but in a great way. And we're just trying to tie that to lots of the other things we do, whether it's through our philanthropic efforts. We have an upcoming Workout Wednesday with a give back opportunity, just really shifting the focus to be more about giving back to our community and not solely focusing on sales and products and promotions and things like that. Because really, it's been a great opportunity for us.
But good, meaty content that almost has a thought leadership bent in establishing yourself around relevant content too.
Right.
Yeah, I like the workouts. I've decided, and I don't want to be insensitive at all, but I've decided that it's very possible that the 19 and COVID-19 really means the pounds that we're putting on. God forbid we ever have a COVID-50. I'm going to be in real trouble.
Right.
Todd, so I have same question as it relates to pitfalls. I've had this theory that retailers and restaurants have been some of the few brands that had an inherent, and bear with me, notwithstanding the challenges you've been through, but have had an inherent marketing and messaging advantage as it relates to just that, marketing and communications, meaning we all enjoyed getting emails from our favorite retailers and restaurants saying, hey, don't forget us, curbside, takeout Tuesday. Whereas if it was the Xerox guy who was saying, make sure you've got your toner while we're out of the, it just felt like people were being predatory or opportunistic. Do you see it the same way, or did you have other pitfalls that we might not be aware of?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me agree with you in that certainly when you're locked up in your house for weeks at a time, hearing from your favorite restaurant or your favorite store is a nice thing. Yeah. And most certainly that was an advantage, I guess you could say, that we enjoyed, is that I think a lot of our tenants were able to build on that equity and in some cases create maybe some green shoots of opportunities maybe in the future that they can explore through maybe interesting technology or solutions on delivery or pickup, whether it's restaurant or regular retail. I think the big challenge for us now is, do we have a concern of that issue of safety and shopping as an experience? And when will I be ready to enjoy that experience? It's one thing to order a product and have it delivered or have it picked up because I need it, but visiting, for example, a mixed-use property of ours, if you don't enjoy that experience, then we're going to have less people wanting to take part in that experience. So for us, the challenge really becomes, how do we make sure that the experience is still fulfilling and enjoyable, but also still being safe and reasonable as it pertains to social distancing and those types of measures that we now have to think about.
Yeah, a lot of logistics, lots to communicate there, a lot of messages. Worth mentioning that we're also on Facebook right now, on Facebook Live. So if you joined us a little bit late, you'll be able to, of course, catch the entire webinar through social media on Facebook and the Sunwest Communications channel, and then also, of course, on the Sunwest website at sunwestpr.com. A couple of additional questions. Here's one from one of our attendees. We are a multifaceted nonprofit organization in education. It's important to prepare any level of reopen based on health of children versus economics, health of employees. How would you say we should message over the summer months? Currently, we communicate weekly. Planning started this week. Anybody want to take that just as based on your communications expertise?
Well, I will give it a shot. So we are sharing our information through a couple different formats. One, as I mentioned before, is just through basic email. But we also have platforms like Sendinblue and some others where you're able to then send a blast out. From our standpoint, the weekly our consumers is a little bit too much. So we dial it back a little bit more on a monthly basis. But again, the folks who have provided the question, I'm not in that category or industry, but in my world, I'm dealing with homeowners and consumers. And from our standpoint, if we oversaturate them, that could also be a disservice to our brand equity.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I really like the call out of this question to keep your focus and reopening steps on health and not necessarily economics at the forefront. I mean, while we have all these other variables to really focus on and the business continuity piece and some really critical pieces, I think we're about to see a really, really big opportunity to lean into values and culture. I mean, I think at Andrews, we've been fortunate enough that the culture is there and the values are there, and it's what Mr. Andrews has driven the business with for over 40 years from day one. But I think it's going to show up differently. I mean, if you're navigating this world and, you know, maybe there's not pay increases this year, or maybe jobs are going to start changing just because needs of our retail customers are changing. So as that looks different, I mean, it's how are we elevating our culture? How are we making our people feel appreciated? How are we keeping the conversation around values? One of which for us is health and the well-being of our people, and making sure that that kind of stays at the focus. So I think as you're focused on those critical pieces that obviously allow a business to keep sustaining itself, you really can't lose sight of the value and culture piece and really need to take an opportunity to lean into it.
Yeah, great points.
I think, Creighton, one thing I might add too is ask your constituents or your audience what would be most helpful to them. So even if it's not just about the cadence of communication on the time frame, but is there something else that you can provide them in this, new environment, or even as you go into the fall and education, that might be really beneficial, and that could really help you just to build that kind of community and that audience to help stick with you through the hard times?
Interesting. I have been using a communications example by a legacy 60-year-old summer camp as an example of a best practice, not only in continuing to communicate, we don't know what we don't know, but weaving messages in around change management. So let me give you an example. They continue to send out emails every other week saying, we wanted to let you know, we still don't know if we're going to be open yet this summer. We want to have your kids. But they start saying, here are some of the things we're considering doing. For example, we might shorten the amount of time that each camper goes to camp. Well, in this particular camp, the amount of time that the kids go is it's legacy, it's tradition. You would never mess with that. So while many folks, perhaps in legal, might say, no, don't float an idea unless it's buttoned up, I think they have very wisely started pushing out just, we might consider doing this in order to get the water a little bit warmer from a change management perspective. I thought it was a very good technique. Let's go to another question. Advice for messaging around benefit and pay changes. COVID pay and leave going away due to collapsing income streams to hourly, non-professional staff. The writer writes, we care, but can't afford it. Understand that everybody wants to get paid before there are possible layoffs. So reactions from each of you, difficult employee decisions that may or may not be coming. Todd, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so one of the things we have currently is we have a town hall every Friday that our CEO runs, and everyone from the company participates. And one of the things that I like that we do during that time is there's a lot of transparency. And I think people appreciate you being transparent, even if it's not news they want to hear. And I think personally, we've been fairly lucky. We've not had to have those difficult conversations at that time. However, we do have an open dialogue. People can ask questions. People can, anyone can go to our CEO or anyone on our executive leadership and ask the status of where we think we are, where we're trying to go. And I think people appreciate the fact that, again, we don't have all the answers right now, but we're willing to give you the answers as we know them if you will accept the fact that those answers may change as conditions change.
Yeah, absolutely. Doug, Christina, Micaela, one of you want to jump in?
We've been fortunate at this point to not have to face it in the current environment, but unfortunately have been through similar situations before. And as y'all know, it's definitely one of the hardest things about being in a leadership position. But I think that open and transparency, like Todd mentioned, being upfront and not just at the top level, but you've got to lean on your directors and your managers and determine what kind of communication you can have with them. And they're having individually with their team members. I think it's important for people to be proactive with employees on an individual basis, just to see how they're feeling and how you can support them. We actually put out a resource for employees whose spouses or immediate family members had lost jobs. And it was just through our HR team, just a resource for them to help resume building. And so even just little things like that you can maybe incorporate might be helpful to your teams.
Doug, you wanted to weigh in?
Yes, similar to what Christina was saying, we also created a variety of different employees to get a gist as to how they were all doing more on a personal level. Do they have anxiety? Are they optimistic about their jobs? What is it they're worried about? So that we then can formulate our conversations back to them, either on a group level or for those who may have responded with more worry, talking to them or talking to their managers to give them some upside as to what we're trying to do to protect all of the employees. We have employees that are taking care of their senior citizen parents that our younger employees don't have. So we really wanted to reach out to everyone and get their own understanding of what they're going through. All of it about their own personal lives at home under quarantine. And from that, we're able to then formulate how we help them their own anxieties and help plan to make them feel comfortable that we're going to be okay and we're going to come out of this just fine.
We've got time here for one more question before we kind of go to our lightning round to conclude. So this participant asks, how do you recommend your client, or as the case may be in a nonprofit, donor-facing employees interact with constituents in their portfolio if they work for an organization that has not been proactively communicating with its external audience? So in other words, your clients, your constituents, not employees, external, and their particular employer hasn't been communicating internally or externally at all. Any advice or insights there? Todd, can I put you on the spot?
Sure, yeah, well, I will say this, we've got an entire communication strategy that really just focuses on our clients and communicating where the company is going and how we see our business with them and the grand scheme of what we're doing. And I think more than anything, in a case like that, leading by example is helpful. For example, to circle back to a conversation from a little while ago, we were very quick to go to our clients and say, we're doing a fundraising initiative right now. This was just days in, when we weren't even sure if that was absolutely something that would be well received at that time. It turns out it was, and we had a lot of help from Sunwest in making sure we messaged that right. And I think in a lot of those instances, it was important to show our clients, maybe it wasn't a verbatim suggestion or, hey, this is what you should or shouldn't say. I think by our actions, it was able to maybe help folks pivot into like, oh, okay, well, they're doing that. That gives me reason to think that maybe we should have that conversation amongst our group, amongst our business on this other side of the equation.
Sure. Okay, so let's, we've got about 5 minutes left. Let's do this. I'd like to conclude with each of you sharing with our audience, if you had to do one thing differently, looking back around crisis communications with COVID-19, what would you do differently? And what would your number one piece of advice of something to do from a communications perspective be in this crisis or any? We'll go backwards. Doug, we'll start with you.
First thing I would do is I would make sure all my employees have good internet speed at home.
Yeah, amen.
That has been one of the challenges that, you know, if more people are at home and everybody's on their computer or the kids are gaming, that connection speed has been really drawn down to a trickle, and their ability to be productive really gets challenged. So I'm sure everybody that's listening in has had that happen. We've probably has happened on our call today just with you all. So that's number one, because that was one thing we did not think about when we were getting everybody to work from home, that could be a challenge. What was the second part of the question, if I may ask again?
If you had to do one thing differently, and if you'd had one piece of advice of something to do.
Sure. So the one piece of advice is leadership has to be active and employee facing, customer facing, supplier facing. It's one thing to have the traditional relationship of managers talking to employees, but without leadership to the highest level possible, directing that plan, you're going to get mixed messages, because if I pass it to my manager and my manager is then talking to an employee, that message is going to get lost. The impact, the honesty of it, the passion about wanting to protect employees or satisfy customers has to come from top leadership. So that would be one thing that I feel is very important.
Good, thank you. I love your bandwidth comment. I was on the phone yesterday with a client at 3 o'clock. He said, "Sorry, my bandwidth just slowed down. My kids are on Netflix." I said, "Well, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Are they still at school?" He said, no, this is my college student who's home. He just woke up." Micaela, let's go to you. Number one piece of advice, communications that you would advise in crisis. Number one thing you would do differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the do differently, I think just continuing to really push for communicating earlier and more often. I think we've had it be a roadblock for us a few times, and it's still something we're just learning how to navigate and working together on with our leadership. I know that we really tried to pivot and have been doing it in terms of putting our president on camera more for video communications. I mean, typically we were maybe getting him on camera 3 to 4 times a year to just do very specific updates on our intranet, but now no one gets to see him. So, I mean, trying to create those moments of FaceTime and connection and really getting authentic messages from him versus something just written and pushed out has really been a big opportunity for us. But at the same time, that comes with a lot of collaboration and trying to find the balance of knowing it's okay that we don't have all the answers, but also really trying to emphasize that our people really appreciate and value just getting to see a face and getting to hear a voice from someone who they trust and really respect. So I think just wanting to push that more. And then in total for just advice, continuing to push in total. I mean, I think really getting to see the type of seat at the table that our communications team has had has been really, really energizing. And it comes with us having days that we feel completely burned out and frustrated and stressed. And we're trying to make it all happen. And sometimes it doesn't always get done. But I know sometimes when, world is good and we're just making things happen, it can be really easy for communicators to fall in a churn of, we take the ask and we can help with the strategy, but then we're kind of just pushing it out and we're done and that's it. And I think this has been a good signal and reminder of no, like your communications team can be great strategic advisors and partners and can really help develop the best approaches to engage with your people and to connect with your other stakeholders outside of your organization. So not falling into that order taking role and really getting to see, my team kind of step up and do what they've always done, but do it in a bigger scale under really stressful situations has been super energizing. And I think it's going to be a really great experience in hindsight to have in our back pocket and be able to move forward with and kind of approach just whatever's next differently.
Good. Christina and Todd, we got about a minute left. Christina, number one do, number one don't on the communication side.
Number one don't would be don't assume that even though you're communicating great, talk to your vendors, your suppliers, your manufacturers, and really get the information from them so that you can help for your own communication. This is a totally off the box something to do, but whether it's you or your management team, think about writing a handwritten card. We've got a stack of postcards. One a day goes out the door to someone just to let them know you're thinking about them and you're here for them.
Great advice. Todd, you get the last word. Number one do, number one don't.
Certainly. I think as far as the number one do, I would love to, and if I had to do this all over again, let's hope I never do in this capacity, just getting started a few days earlier. We learned that it would not have hurt to have a conversation of what does it look like if a property has to close. I would love to have started those conversations even 3 or 4 days before we had to have them. So that was a big learning moment for me. I think as far as the to-do, right now, take an opportunity to be a leader. You know, in our industry, we're not shying away from taking advantage of opportunities where we can provide thought leadership, how our organization wants to lead in terms of where we think our industry is going. And that's been a big win for us. We're not afraid to sort of tackle those interesting or difficult conversations. And what we're finding is that it's allowing us to create a sense of just confidence and a sense of differentiation within our space. And I think it's going to provide long-term a lot of benefit for us moving forward.
So Todd Anderton from Trademark Property Company, Christina Helwig from AdvoCare International, Micaela Rosinski from Andrews Distributing Company, and Doug Ward from GeoGlobal Partners in Florida. I just want to thank all of you so much for being so willing to share so openly about your experience in crisis communications around COVID-19. And I want to thank all of our participants. We've had folks from all over the country, from Irvine, California to DC and Delaware, who've joined us today. If you'd like to see it again today, this particular webinar at any time, you can go to sunwestpr.com or on any of our social media channels, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or Instagram. We'll have links. I want to thank you all again for joining us, and also just wish you all the very best in this difficult and trying time. I just hope you and your families all stay well and healthy, be kind, and communicate. Thanks again from all of us at Sunwest Communications, and we look forward to seeing you the next time. Have a great day and a great weekend.